Good morning, guys. I'm going to report the article titled Identity Forming Discourses, a critical discourse analysis on policy making processes concerning English language teaching in Colombia by Yesid Escobar Alméciga from Universidad El Bosque. This report begins by talking a little bit about the document Education Vision 2019. Then it introduces an overview of English language policy making processes in Colombia, and it defines four main concepts. And then the report or the article presents the CDA analysis and the findings. In the first part of the article, the author talks a little bit about some of the documents or some of the programs that have been implemented in Colombia in terms of language policies, and he cited some authors. For example, Ayala and Alvarez in 2005. They talked a little bit about the CEF and its implementation in our Colombian context, and they said that Colombia's geographical conditions are totally different from the conditions that European countries have. They also said that specific characteristics of English language teachers and students have not been taken into account in order to come up with these standards, and that the particularities of Colombian educational systems should be taken into consideration in order to have a more adequate and proper program for teaching and learning English. Guerrero in 2008, she said that there is an agreement between the British Council and the Ministry of Education, and the objective of this agreement is to preserve and protect interests of varying natures, and that this agreement and these standards, what they are promoting is the idea of bilingualism, or the idea of being bilingual just as an English speaker. So bilingual means speaking English, and the bilingualism it's or has become a homogeneous idea. Then he mentions part of 2007, who said that policymakers are not qualified to make decisions, and that there are some factors that has not been taken into account in order to well-being of the country's citizens. Then he presents the two research questions. The first one is what identity forming discourses regarding English language teaching can be unveiled in the document Education Vision 2019. And the second, what do discursive strategies reveal about the way content is being produced, presented, handled, transformed, and or manipulated in the document Education Vision 2019. The theoretical framework defines four main concepts. The first one is identity, and with citing Norton. The author says that identity is constructed through relationships, and that identity is a matter of choice that is governed by our understanding and perception of the world around us. Then he describes discourses, and as we have read before, discourses are everything we say, we read and hear, but in this case discourse plays a very important role in forming and transforming identities, and is also defined as the study of language used, the study of meaning in context. Then finally he describes power and control. Power in terms of relations of power which create, justify, and reproduce limit between different groups. We take into account that there are differences or categories, for example, gender, social class, nationality, and their power creates or opens up the gap among social groups. And then control, which establishes legitimate forms of communication and generates the legitimate relations between categories. The research method used with critical discourse analysis, the author talked about intertextual analysis and intertextual analysis. Intertextual is in the text, so he used the information found in the text and he analyzed it. And then intertextual is because he used and he mentioned other documents that also talked about other standards and other language policies in Colombia. The findings is that there are three main discourses in this document. The first one is being bilingual, then the second is being successful, and the third is being Colombian. The article only reports the first two main discourses due to length issues. The author didn't talk about the last one. Being bilingual, the author said that there are some discursive strategies used. For example, the first one is the exclusion, inclusion, and prominence, and he said that we can see this from the very beginning of the document, from some of the titles. For example, in this this part of the test that says command of English as a foreign language, he says that using English, the expression English as a foreign language is excluding the other language that are considered foreign languages, and that could be like part of our standards too. When he says exclusion, inclusion, and prominence, it's because purposively, in order to compose or form the test, it comes from a representative point of view that probably is just omitting, or it's not including, it's an exclusion of other things that could be like placed in the same categories. Then he talks a little bit about nominalization, which is when the actors are backgrounded or completely omitted. And if you take a look at the examples that I'm going to show you, you will see that there is no reference to the source where this information was taken from. So we cannot go to the source and see if this information is actually real and accurate. I want you to take a look at the second example. It said measuring was done taking as a reference point the level scale from the Common European Framework. That measuring, how was that measuring done? Like, we don't really know who did it, when was done, and where we can find the information. Then to the second main discourse, which is being successful, the author only described one discursive strategy, which is representations as recontextualization. And in this case, the author said that when we use this strategy, the objective is transferring a specific reality from a given place to another, which has completely different characteristics. So if you take a look, what they are doing is implementing something that probably was appropriate for the European context, but what we're trying to do is giving it characteristics to make it useful for a Colombian context. But it doesn't mean that it's true. If you take a look at the words, we have mobility, possible, competitive capacity, acquired knowledge. However, we're given like real characteristics to something that hasn't been applied or that was not constructed for a context. The findings that the author described were related to what this discourses produced in terms of identity. He said that standardization, homogenization, and simplification of the notion of language is presented in all this document, especially in the document he used. Then English is promoted by citing false characteristics, and you can see that in the last discursive strategy I just mentioned, that our educational system is deteriorating, and that we've seen education as equal to marketplace. We are prioritizing the foreign over the local. And then he said that English language teaching policies in Colombia has three main characteristics, which are shape identities through discursive practices, benefit specific social groups, and broaden the gap between social groups. I hope it's cleared, and I would invite you to read this article. It's very interesting, and it's something that like touches us because we're language teachers and language learners. Bye, guys.